this is the ground on which our fiat takes form. God has chosen us for this time, for this day, for these problems. And it's our call and our responsibility to be the voice for the kingdom of God and human dignity in the world. But he also doesn't ask us to do that on our own.
Welcome to Matters of Soul Importance, where we dive deeply into topics of both earthly and eternal consequence. I'm Roxanne Solonen, faith columnist and features writer for The Forum, author and speaker. I met my guest today, Samantha Stevenson, at a retreat for writers of the website CatholicMom.com in Easton, Massachusetts. I was just starting year 2 of this podcast and learned about Samantha's podcast, so was naturally drawn to her. It was a busy weekend with many connections made, but I was grateful to have at least one meal where I was able to chat a little with Samantha, who reminds me of a younger version of myself, only much more prolific than I was as a young mother. I learned that not only was she a devoted mother, but a convert to the Catholic faith, and trained in bioethics, an area of study that has been of interest to me in recent years especially. Samantha is smart, studious, and a loving mother who finds home to be her mission. It's not often that a woman can bring all these things together, both a notable professional life and a committed family life. But don't we all wish for something along these lines? To be both known for our work in the home, as well as for any contributions we might make outside of it, being first children of God, even before we are parents. Samantha seems to have figured it out somehow, though I'm sure she'll say it comes with its good and bad days. I've caught her, though, at a particularly fruitful time in her life. She has not one, but 2 books coming out very soon. One of them is a modern-day version of C.S. Lewis's classical work, The Screwtape Letters, which sees the world from the perspective of the evil one and how he's trying to ensnare us modernists. That work has been influential in many lives, and I'm intrigued to learn how Samantha has taken the genius of Lewis and cast her own spin on it. We'll talk a little bit about C.S. Lewis today, his influence on her life, along with some of the other fascinating topics Samantha has her hand in. I can't wait to introduce you to this thoughtful, talented mother and writer. So, without further ado. Welcome, Samantha, to Matters of Soul Importance. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, it's so good to talk with you today. We're going to attempt to answer a question. I know a lot of people love C.S. Lewis, no matter what kind of Christian or maybe non-Christian they are, because C.S. started as an atheist and he had a lot of probing questions. But we're going to ask and answer hopefully the question, what can C.S. Lewis teach us today, among other things? But before we go there, can you take us through parts of your background and your faith journey, just to get to know you a little bit, maybe where you grew up and did you have siblings? And also, what was the faith like in your family, to kind of just get that background?
Sure. So I grew up in Maui, Hawaii, and we were very active in the Lutheran Church. My dad played guitar. I had one brother, he played bass, and I sang in the worship band. And that was kind of the backbone of our family's life. We always went to church on Sunday and then youth group. And then we'd have band practice on Fridays. And my dad and I would stay late and play music together. That was kind of before my brother was in the band. But then we would go to the beach all day Sunday with all of our crew from church. So it was very rooted in faith and rooted in community. And it was a really big part of our lives. I did other normal stuff. I went to Catholic school and was very active there in faith stuff and school, all the clubs, and classic overachiever, varsity swim team captain, all of those normal things. And then I went off to a Catholic college, and that's where I became Catholic. I converted there at Alumni in Los Angeles.
Okay. Well, I wasn't expecting you to say you were from Hawaii. That's the first for our show. I know there's people that live in Hawaii. I have a high school friend that lives there, so I get little updates from there. So that's interesting. Did your parents grow up there, or were they transplants?
No. Yeah, my mom is from all over. Her family moved all over growing up. My dad was in the Air Force. I was a military brat, but then the moving was kind of when I was little, and when I was 5, we moved to Hawaii. And I graduated from high school there. So he got out of the military while we lived there. So it's kind of my whole childhood that I can remember was in Hawaii.
Yeah. Well, and then you brought up Lutheranism, and that's a big in our area here in North Dakota, Minnesota, very heavily Lutheran. So there's going to be some people that are going to be connecting with that as well here today. Yeah, I remember when I moved here from Montana and saw all of the Scandinavian names on the buildings, like on my college and stuff like that. It was so foreign to me. But I grew up on a reservation, so that was a completely different experience. So it was foreign to me to see all the Lutheran and the Scandinavian influence, because I didn't see a lot of that growing up. So, but anyway, okay. Well, and where were you in the birth order? I always kind of like.
I'm first, I have a younger brother. He's 3 years younger than me, and he and his wife live in Santa Cruz, California these days.
Okay. Well, that's the overachiever that tends to be that firstborn. Not always, but yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
better for worse.
Tell me a little bit about. Okay. So, where did you go to college again? Maybe you said
Loyola Marymount in Los Angeles. Oh. If you've been through LAX, it's like right next to the airport.
Okay. All right. So what was it then? Let's talk a little bit about your conversion, because we're talking about things of earthly and eternal consequence. So, so you had that little bit of a background growing up and going to a Catholic school. Then what was it though that kind of pulled you into the Catholic faith in college? Because when I was a Catholic in college, I was kind of being tempted away from the Catholic faith, although I was pretty grounded.
That would be more typical, yeah.
Yeah. So you went the opposite way. What was it like? What sort of questions were you facing as a young adult that drew you there?
Yeah, well, I think I had a lot of intellectual questions. Like I said, I had really a strong upbringing in the Lutheran Church. So I had very strong faith in Jesus. I had a prayer life, and our youth group we would just read through the Bible and whatever book of the Bible, and we would discuss it, line by line. And there were some interesting moments, because for the most part, I felt like, this makes a lot of sense intellectually and spiritually. But there were just some questions that were lingering when I would go to those studies, especially like when we looked at the book of James, for example. Like I can remember that as a specific one where I was reading and thinking, like we in the Lutheran Church, we have this sola fide, sola scriptura, sola gratia, that we're saved by faith alone and grace alone. But then in the book of James, it says faith without works is dead. And the things in the book of James just seem to be saying something a little bit different than the doctrine that I was being brought up to understand. So I had like lingering questions like that, a few of them. And I was going to Catholic school and getting a Catholic education there, but the people I was going to school with didn't really want to discuss those questions. I didn't really find anyone to talk about that stuff with there. But then when I went to college, there were a lot of people who knew their faith really well and who were ready to discuss those kinds of questions with me. And so I was actually with a group of really on fire Catholics that had been brought up in like life teen kind of a culture and knew their apologetics really well. One in particular, he took me to the cafeteria and he says, like, I know you're thinking about these things. He sat me down. He goes, okay, he had Bible in one hand and was like, what are your objections? So we went through and we looked at the scripture. He knew the scripture for every single objection that I had coming from Protestantism to the church. And I didn't actually know this until then he gave the toast at our wedding. He was the best man at our wedding, but he went back to his roommate and he's like, I just met the girl that you're going to marry. So that was kind of
wow.
That was a fun story.
I was thinking he was interested in you. I was wondering if he was going to be the one. But instead,
at the time, he was discerning the priesthood, and he actually did. He went to the novitiate for a year, to the Jesuit novitiate, but then he ended up leaving, and now he's happily married to our good friend, and we see them. They also live here in Idaho, but that's kind of an aside to this whole story. But then his roommate, my future husband, started to get to know me too, because we're all part of the same campus ministry group. And it was my future husband that gave me Rome Sweet Home, and that kind of by Scott Hahn, which for listeners who don't know is a it's a book by a Protestant minister who eventually, through reading the Bible and church history, he converted to Catholicism. And so that was very helpful for me intellectually, because he wasn't Lutheran, but he was coming from a really similar, I'm on fire for Jesus. I love scripture. Let's go where scripture says we should go. So he's coming from that perspective and reading what he learned and how he understood. And like, there's other books too, like the Bible Made Me Catholic and things like that. But that's really, there was that intellectual search for truth. I was also going to XLT Adoration at the time. So I had to, which is where you go and you pray before Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament. And so I had to resolve that question for myself of, am I worshiping God, or is it idolatry? Because it's one or the other. And so through a lot of intellectual formation, prayer formation, community, God drew me into the church.
So interesting, because I went through a reversion, I guess. I didn't really leave, but I was really questioning. I had married a non-Catholic and was really trying to settle some questions within myself too. Like, am I going to stick with this, or I wanted to be one. So I, was trying to figure out where I was going. Ultimately, my husband crossed over the Tiber with me. But I had to get some things, I had to get some understanding, because we were really lacking catechesis growing up. But anyway, Rome Sweet Home was one of my formative books as well during that time. And actually, Scott Hahn's conversion tape was the first thing that I think I came out of college feeling a little bit, maybe a little bit of shame for being Catholic. There was like a lot of, it wasn't like now, we didn't have social media. There wasn't so much information out there, but there was something, I had just confronted different things and different questions that I hadn't really been able to answer fully. And so I had a lot of wondering, and I really had to, I knew that I wanted children someday, and I wanted them to have the understanding one way or the other, so of their heritage. So I kind of went on a deep dive, but anyway, another diversion, but yes, Scott Hahn. But the thing about that book is his wife was not quite there with him. Yeah. And she was a daughter of a very strong Presbyterian minister. And so the book is really this kind of like conflict, not really conflict, but just them working out like his conversion and then ultimately hers. And yeah, they've been a powerhouse and are to this day, and I know have affected many people. But anyway, so then your husband was Catholic?
He became Catholic in high school, which is also not really the most difficult thing for a high school student, but
what was he before that?
Not really anything, like vaguely Christian. They went to church, Protestant, whatever was close by, once a year, twice a year, kind of. His mom was baptized Catholic. And then actually after he got baptized and became Catholic, then she had a reversion, and his stepdad did. And then a few years later, many years later, I was the sponsor for his grandma who came into the church. So there was just a lot of good ripple effects from that one conversion.
And of course, we all need to be converting, every minute of the day. So, but lots of conversions going on in that family, which I love. I love the fresh energy of people who have really thought through their faith. And we all need to, at some point, embrace the faith on our own as adults and in our own time. So God doesn't have grandchildren, as the saying goes. So, okay, well, I want to turn now and find out, because C.S. Lewis was also kind of pivotal in my early, I was, by then my husband was Catholic. We were new parents. And again, I just kept wanting to dive deeper into my faith. And then I came across C.S. Lewis. What was your first meeting? How did you come across C.S. Lewis, and how did he affect your faith to the point that you wanted to write a book kind of based on one of his books?
Well, I think the first time I ever read C.S. Lewis has to be when my mom read Chronicles of Narnia to us as kids. She's a big reader and read to us a lot as kids. I really vibrantly remember Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and the idea of Turkish delight. And now I know that was about sin. The witch offers Edmund this thing that once he tastes it, he can't resist it. When I was a kid, I just thought it was a metaphor for drugs, but it was still really effective in that way, keeping me off the drugs, I guess. But so that was like my earliest exposure. And then I remember falling in love with that same book series all over again when I read it again in college, and kind of being able to grapple a little bit more with the spiritual meaning of it is really powerful. And then I can't actually remember when the first time I read the Screwtape Letters was, but that's a series of letters, kind of satirical letters in the voice of a senior demon to a younger demon explaining how to tempt this new Christian. It probably was in college the first time I read it. But it's so brilliant the way that he's able to expose really the human psychology of temptation. And then my husband and I, as a married couple, we try to read it every Lent. I would say when Screwtape doesn't get the best of us, like, oh, we're too tired tonight, let's not read it. And, but it's a good book to read during Lent because, it really gets to the nature of temptation and kind of how people are tempted to different extremes. So that is the book that I ended up basing my book's called The Bellbind Letters, and it's specifically for how mothers are tempted, because the character in Lewis's book is a new Christian and he's a man. And so then that's great. And I think it applies universally, like regardless of gender. But I also think there are ways that women are specifically tempted. And so it was, I guess, I don't want to say, because you're writing in the voice of a demon, so there's something dark there, but it was also interesting and to play with how women are specifically tempted. They're unique gifts. They have unique contributions to offer to the world. And I think if we just look around, like, right, the things that are tempting men and the things that are tempting women specifically are different. So I think somebody could do one specifically for men. And you could probably make a whole series on it because there's a lot of temptation in the world.
Yeah. Temptations for teens, temptations for whatever. Yeah. So I've studied Edith Stein, and I'm thinking you probably have run across her as well. And so I know she really had a handle on the different ways, that our hearts, our souls we have a propensity towards different things. Can you kind of share then some of those specific things that were illuminated in your book that maybe people haven't thought about, or maybe they have and just want to connect with that? What are certain things that a feminine person, and we have a genius, but we also have we have weaknesses too. What are they, would you say, Samantha? And you're a woman, so you can speak to this.
Yeah. Okay. There's a few different things. Well, I think first, if you look at the original Screwtape Letters, there's a lot of sort of societal temptations and intellectual things that the patient is what they call the main character in the book, that he goes through. And then the relational aspect, like the way that he's tempted in his various relationships, is sort of secondary. And I think with women, at least in the book that I wrote, it's flipped. And a lot of the temptation we talk about happens within interpersonal relationships. And then the broader society, maybe less so, or these different intellectual currents within culture. So there's letters on friendship and the ways that we're tempted to, and I don't even say like tempted like it's a good thing, but just the little ways that the enemy tries to break down, because he doesn't want us to have connection. Like the iron sharpens iron. And so when we have these good, solid spiritual friendships with women, like the enemy doesn't want that. That's scary. So how can he weasel his way in there and undermine or get between us to have us think about each other, or see each other as competition, or we all want connection. So how does he twist that? Well, I'm going to make you feel close to someone and included when you're gossiping and you're excluding someone else. And we know like that's not the virtuous way to relationship. But when we are so hungry for temptation, that's very, that can be really deceptive and really appealing to think, oh, I'll be part of the in crowd if I'm leaving someone out. And then I think another way that we're uniquely gifted, right? Because the temptations are going to be tied towards trying to separate us from the ways that we should be bringing God's light into the world. I think women have we are a special witness to the beauty of God in a way that men aren't as much. And so we have this temptation to use our beauty for things that are, self-praising or turn us inward rather than turn us outward. And then, whether we're feeling like, oh, I'm so gifted with beauty, and we're tempted towards pride, like, oh, I'm going to find my identity in this. I'm going to find my status in this. Or we're tempted to think like, oh, I'm not good enough because I don't have this gift enough. And then we're thinking, oh, God hasn't given me this good thing. Like he's withheld it. There's just virtue is always the midpoint between two extremes. So if you just play out, well, here's the good, here's the ideal, and then you just pervert that, enemy does. Just which way can I tempt this particular woman, this particular patient? Is it going to be to this extreme? Oh, she's not tempted by that. Okay, well, I'll just tempt her to the other extreme, basically.
How did you approach it? Like, did you do the same thing where you have sort of the narrative or the big view, which is old scratch, right? Looking down and kind of like, how did you kind of follow that same pattern, or how did you set it up?
Well, there's 30 letters, so it's not as many letters as the original one. But each one has a topic that was sort of a temptation that I had faced, or I'm part of several women's groups. So if it wasn't me, it was something multiple people had voiced in various women's groups of, and then it's sort of loosely a story. So it's one-sided. So you're only getting the letters from the tempter's name is Boomslang. So my dear Bellbind, and then Boomslang comes from a really venomous snake that, fun fact, there's an anti-venom for that snake, but you can only be cured if you have a blood transfusion. So I really liked the symbolism and of that, just like the idea that you needed someone else's blood to save you from from a snake,
Yeah.
So all the letters are just that one side. So each one will pick up, and presumably, if you got a bunch of letters and you kept them in a stack from someone, you wouldn't have the other letters because they're with the other person, right? That's how Lewis did it too. So each letter picks up on the next event, sort of, that's going on in this patient's life, this woman's life. And so it could be, oh, now she's pregnant. Okay, or now she suffered a miscarriage. Well, don't you be celebrating yet, because here's the danger. And it's reversed, right? So the danger is that she might grow closer to the enemy through this event. So here's how to deal with that.
Oh gosh, I think about abortion because I pray at our local abortion facility, and there's a gal that I've had on my podcast who's been through abortion and is very wise now in her years, and she's a grandmother, but she's had a lot of time to think through how the enemy talked to her immediately after her abortion, going from leading her into it, telling her that this wasn't going to be a problem, that everything was going to be great, and then telling her she was terrible. She was a terrible person for doing this. You go right into the shame and the guilt and everything. It just immediately in her experience went from one and flipped down over to the other. And then she had to live with that. And that just broke open her heart. So anyway, just kind of one little possibility too in there. I'm fascinated. I can't wait. It's not out yet. You've been living with this, I'm sure, for a couple of years, but
yeah, I got delayed too. So it was supposed to come out in the fall. So it's just been, I wrote it a couple of years ago, and it's been a long time in the editing, publishing process. So I'm very excited to share it with the world.
Yes, I know that feeling. Who's publishing it?
Our Sunday Visitor.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. All right. So that'll be out like very soon, because we're going to drop this in February.
It comes out, I think, the day before Ash Wednesday. So it actually is really perfectly timed for Lent.
Oh, yeah. Very good. Very good. Any other things about, one thing I was going to ask, actually, I remember reading that C.S. Lewis really, really struggled after he wrote the Screwtape Letters and basically said, I'm never going to do that again. Like that was like, it brought a darkness into his life. Did that happen to you? If not, how did you assuage that? Like,
Yeah, I remember reading that about him too, and I don't know what it says about me, but I didn't have that same struggle with it. I actually found a lot of peace and freedom in being able to articulate these temptations. And it is dark too, right? Because I write about keeping someone away from confession, and how do you do that? Keeping somebody away from the graces of the Eucharist, and when you write in that other voice about holy things, that it's sacrilegious what you're saying. So I guess there's that struggle. But on the other hand, when you and writing it was a process of like gaining this kind of clarity. When you have that clarity of, oh, the enemy really hates this thing, then when those things are hard for you to do, you can be like, yes, these things are hard for me to do because the enemy doesn't want me to do them because they are so good. So it's like extra motivation. Because I really struggle with getting myself to confession. So if I remember, like the enemy really he really wants you to stay in that show, or he really wants you to stay in that apathy of like, it's not that important. Where is that coming from?
Yes. When you're, I just remember one time reaching for some candy or something, because that's one of my downfalls is sugary things. But I just had that moment of the evil one wants you to do this. Like, and it was like, no, I am not going to appease. When you feel like, and you remember that he's cheering you on to do the bad things, then that, I'm stubborn enough to go, nope, you're not gonna get me this time. I wish I could do that every single time, but yeah.
That's one of the things St. Ignatius says, that we should talk to the enemy of human nature, is how he says it in the spiritual exercises. Like, we should talk to him like a small child, or he says, okay, he's a man of his time, so we'll forgive him for this, but like a weak-willed woman, you just say no, like you cut it off. And I think that's helpful to think about going into Lent too, is if you decide on a Lenten sacrifice, inevitably you're going to be like, well, is it really that important? Like at some point in the 40 days, do I really need to do that? And you're going to, it's a struggle until you're just like, no, the reason I'm struggling with this is because the enemy doesn't want me to do this. So I'm going to say with a very firm voice, very loud and clear, no, I'm not doing that. Or if it's something you're supposed to be, like one thing I have as a goal, but often struggle with actually doing, is saying a rosary every day. But then I kind of, there's this phrase in scripture, it's that we bring the sacrifice of praise. And that phrase really helps me to think about, okay, it's supposed to be a sacrifice. Like, I'm not supposed to necessarily enjoy every minute of this. So that kind of helps me to put the armor of prayer on and go to battle. Because it's not always like nice, fluffy feelings, although it can be that too, but
and I'm thinking about through the mother's perspective, it's obviously outside of ourselves. So when we see our child in danger, we're not going to go, hey, honey, we're going to go, stop, don't do that if they're in imminent danger. And so, yes, there are times to be stern about it. Well, I could go on and on about C.S. Lewis, and ultimately we do want to ask the question, what can C.S. Lewis teach us today? I'm going to circle back to that at the end. I'm going to leave that for now. We're going to come back at the end and answer that question. I want to, because you have so many things going on, Samantha, I want to kind of dive into some of your other work. So first, let's start with, you have another book coming out like almost immediately. It's funny because my first two children's books came out the same year, but I wrote them in vastly different years. And it was so overwhelming to me. It was also the year that I had my fifth child. And I'm like, why does it? Yeah, because I'd been writing for several years, and then I was adding, on the way to publication, children. And I started with two. And then I had five by the time both of my children's books came out the same year. It was just, I'm like, why can't I just have one thing at a time? Anyway, I don't know if you're feeling that, but it's like so many blessings that it's like almost hard to breathe. As soon as that book comes out, you have another one. So tell us about that.
Yeah, it's just a good metaphor for that. But we could, before we go into the book, is Father Mike Schmitz, just on one of his recent homilies, was talking about when you plant a bamboo seed and the bamboo grows underground for something, I forget exactly what he said, but like 5 years, and you don't see anything. But then if you know anything about how bamboo grows, it grows like multiple feet a day. So it's like once it sprouts above the ground, bam, you've got like a giant stalk of bamboo really quickly. That just has been a good metaphor for life, even with kids. Like, you put all of this time and energy into your kids, and then you don't necessarily see the results when you have to tell them the same, like, don't do that, like, stop fighting with your brother. And you have years and years and years of that before you start to see the results of character and virtue coming to fruition.
Yes. We are not good in our society with waiting on things, and it's a lesson in perseverance. And I am not the most patient person, so I've had to learn that through life, through the hard way, the life of hard knocks. But anyway, yeah. So you also homeschool your children. Tell us about how many kids you have and how that kind of journey went, because I think maybe your next book has to maybe connects with that a little bit.
A little bit, yeah, and it connects with the plant metaphor too. You just use it, grow where you're planted, reclaiming Eden in your own backyard. And so there's a prayer component and then a practical component of basically growing food for your family. And so each season has a prayerful section of looking at the spiritual metaphors of how do we see God in nature and in these seasons of blooming, in these seasons of dormancy, depending on the season, and then goes into the practical. Okay, if you're going to grow a garden, then here are the things that you should be doing and thinking about in spring to cultivate your garden. Here's what you can be doing in fall. Even winter is really important, especially in things like the chill hours needed for certain fruit trees. And you can't grow fruit, certain kinds of fruit, without having those hours of cold and darkness, which is interesting to think about what God grows through the cold and darkness of our own lives. And then with relating to homeschooling, each chapter has like 6 or 7 tips for fostering this love of nature and love of God in your kids. So it's like tips for little gardeners. And those are really fun to come up with because they're great to do if you're just looking for an activity to do with your kids to get closer. But they also can be homeschool lessons. And that's kind of where I've done all these things with my kids, and they're part of our homeschooling practice. And then there's an add-on, like a downloadable add-on, that's free with the book if you are homeschooling and you wanted to turn those tips into a full year science curriculum. There's a PDF download that goes with the book. So you can be praying with it yourself and then expanding it into the practical. And there's a lot of literature, some fun hands-on activities, and then really the growing and the eating and the cooking and preserving and all of that becomes your science.
That's such a great analogy as far as the growing things. This is a very agricultural area where we are too, and so there's a lot of farmers, and but that is such a
probably
great.
Don't need it as much.
Oh well, no, we still have the city life too, so definitely. And I know a lot of homeschooling moms. You kind of touched on something there about healthy eating and growing your own thing. Can you share a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, personally, the journey of growing our own food for me came out of a struggle with chronic illness. I have Hashimoto's hypothyroidism, and I didn't really understand how it was affecting my life because it's kind of this collection of symptoms that also sound like being a mom. So you get really exhausted, you gain weight, and you can't take it off. And you have, if you're under medicated, then you struggle with like exhaustion, depression. If you're over medicated, then you get anxiety, panic attacks, like symptoms of and so being tired and gaining weight and being, having like your moods go up and down due to stress and things like that. Like that's also just part of parenting. So I didn't understand for a long time. I knew that I had the disease, the disorder, but I didn't. The doctor, he diagnosed me in pregnancy, and he was kind of like, you have this, you have to take this pill for the rest of your life. And that was it. And I kept like trying to find a doctor who could explain, is there anything else I could do? I went to so many doctors, asked, is there anything else? No, all you can do is medication. All you can do is medication. But like I said, thanks to social media, the internet, I saw other people who had the same thing, who were doing other things that were helping them, because it's not just you take this pill. For this particular issue, the body attacks the thyroid tissue, and every cell of your body needs thyroid hormone in order to thrive. So literally at a cellular level, you're starving for energy. So hence the exhaustion. But I started to find like other people with other autoimmune diseases, other chronic disease, they were also being able to find more natural ways to really address the root causes, because in some ways, autoimmune diseases are all connected, right? Your immune system that's supposed to protect you from outside issues starts to attack yourself. And there's lots of natural things that we can do to help our bodies to not feel so angry at our own selves and not attack us so much. And so living like this non-toxic lifestyle and eating healthy food, organic food that it has more nutrients in it because it is coming from good soil that has nutrients to give to the food, things like that has helped to immensely for me to flourish. And there's also a downloadable list of all my favorite non-toxic products if people are looking for that, but you don't want to have to go try a bunch because not all of the non-toxic products work that well. So I've tried a lot of them. So if people are interested in that, that's available too as a free download with the book.
Would you say to Samantha that anyone would benefit, whether you have an autoimmune issue or not, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I think I would say most of us are suffering from some aspect of our toxic environment without, whether we are aware of it or not. Like I was not aware of it for probably like 8 years, and there's things I could have been doing. But whether it's like the microplastics in our water or just being able to eat healthier sources of food that don't have these chemicals like glyphosate, that is a pesticide they use in wheat that causes cancer, and they know it causes cancer, but the company that makes it, Monsanto, is like very powerful in being able to, so they've paid out billions of dollars to the farmers and things who have gotten cancer, but it's still on the market. And that's one of the things that's like destroying gut health and making it difficult for even people who don't have like a diagnosable illness are still suffering in ways that maybe they think are, oh, this is just how life is. Like my body is just,
I'm just getting older because I feel like I might have some things, but we just toss it off to older age and maybe not. Yeah. I'm really interested because I know that there's things that I could be doing differently, but I'm so overwhelmed by it. So I would love to get some tips on that and someone who's done the research, because you were going through the grind of trying to like have a healthier life. And that sounds so good. Well, we're going to take a short break here. We still have some different topics because you have so much to offer, Samantha. Your life is so varied in so many beautiful ways. I want to, on the other side, start tackling bioethics because I know that's an area that you've dove into as well, and it's fascinating. So we're going to take a little break with more Matters of Soul Importance with Samantha Stevenson after this little break.
Get 6 months of local news for just $2. You get unlimited access to the news and information you need to stay connected to your community. Visit inforum.com/subscribe to get 6 months of local news for just $2.
Welcome back to Matters of Soul Importance. Roxanne Solonen here with our guest, Samantha, who, first of all, we're going to jump back into her second book that's coming out in March. Samantha, is that right?
Yes. That one comes out March 17th, I want to say.
Okay. All right. St. Patrick's Day. So what is the title again? And then if you want to share a little bit more about it, and then we'll jump into the bioethics aspect of your life.
Yeah, it's called Grow Where You're Planted, Reclaiming Eden in Your Own Backyard. And they're calling it a guide to seasonal abundance and sustainable family life.
Maybe you could, before we move on, talk about the Eden aspect of that, because that's intriguing to me. How did that kind of come into it? What is the idea there, and kind of from a spiritual perspective?
Okay, so from a spiritual perspective, it's interesting because this it was a huge passion of mine, but the project was brought to me. It wasn't something I was thinking about doing before. And as I wrote, I understood that it was actually Grow Where You're Planted was a metaphor spiritually for how do we address perfectionism. And by we, I mean me. Like that was very much what God had for me in this book, was understanding that we're never going to be perfect, but we can always grow where we are, and to understand in a deeper way the affection God has for us in that it's not something like, oh, you have to live up to these demands. He's not a demanding, even like an overbearing father, but an affectionate father who's watching you struggle to tie your shoes and is very patient, and eventually you're going to get it, but he doesn't expect you to know how to tie them already. He's going to sit there with you as you learn to do those things. And that's really true in the garden too. You only have the skills you have, and it's okay to start where you are, and to start with what you're given and then build from there. So that's kind of the overarching metaphor that you can find in every spiritual reflection in the book across the seasons, is this idea of growing where you're planted is, yes, about growing what you can with the space that you have, but spiritually it's about having patience with yourself, and being able to not be overly critical of yourself, so overly critical that you can't just start where you are and grow from there.
I think the word hope is coming to mind too. I think of returning to Eden. Sometimes I think we feel like we've gotten too far along the road and there's no turning back. There's no going back to like that place of innocence and beginnings and newness. I think we feel tarnished and we feel like it's too late and we're already too far, right? And so I don't know if that kind of, but I love the hope that seems to evoke when I think of that subtitle. So I'm sure it's a very hopeful approach as well. So
yes.
Yeah. Okay. So now bioethics, jumping along to the next topic. Oh my gosh, your life is just like God has pulled you in all these different directions. How did that come onto your path? Bioethics and biotechnology.
So I first started working on bioethics when I was an undergrad. I have a degree in theology and I have a master's degree in theology, but then I also have a master's degree in bioethics. So when I was an undergrad, my favorite professor, I took every class he offered. And then my very last semester as an undergrad, he offered an intro to bioethics, contemporary bioethics. So these questions that have to do, and what really intrigued me, there's a lot of aspects of how ethics and medical care and research and technology all interact. But the part that really drew me in were these emerging biotechnologies. So reproductive technology being kind of what people are most familiar with, I think, IVF. But then there's just a whole host of amazing and like terrifying areas of research. So that's kind of my area of interest. I won't say area of expertise, but my area of interest that I research a lot, host podcasts and write about.
I know I think is your Substack. There's an embryo that sort of has mechanical aspects to it.
Oh, yeah. So that's the logo for the podcast is called Brave New Us. So it's a play on Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. He wrote this dystopian novel 100 years ago. And if you read it, a lot of the aspects that he was imagining of where we would go, they're coming to life now with this sort of laboratory located reproduction, genetic manipulation, and things like that. So that's where the name for the podcast, Brave New Us, comes from, Brave New World.
What is your area that you're really thinking about now and really concerned about? What are some things we can kind of dive in and look peer into the issue where, I mean, you mentioned that there's some scary things coming down the pike. What are you concerned about?
There's a few areas that we could talk about. So one of them is genetic editing technology and the eugenics that are coming out of that with CRISPR, which is a technology that allows you to go in and kind of like cut and paste out genes that you don't like for genes that are better. So there's a lot of areas of concern with that. There's also a lot of areas of hope with that because they used a 13-year-old girl who had leukemia, end-stage leukemia, used all the traditional treatments. She was not able to recover. So she was a good candidate for, therapeutic emergency use. And she went into remission through the use of CRISPR. So it's not like, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Right. And we want to be able to harness and before it was a reality, long before John Paul II was saying, that kind of thing is a illicit, legitimate use of that technology. So there's a lot of things that we want to exercise great caution about. We don't want to be playing God, but also we don't want to just completely say no to these things that have great potential to help heal people. Another area is stem cells. They're doing crazy things with growing organs and things like that for experimentation. So they're growing mini brains. So then there's questions of consciousness. There's also potentially great research uses for that. So that's one area. And then I think the third one, if we're just going to limit it to 3, which is probably good, it would be neurotechnology and the brain implants. Elon Musk is working on Neuralink, which is helping. The goals at this moment are to help paralyzed people walk, help people who can't communicate to talk by putting these technologies in this brain-computer interfaces. Facebook, I guess that's called Meta now, they came out with this neural band. So you won't even have to touch your phone. You could just move your hand like you're touching your phone and it'll be connected to your phone to control it that way. So things like that, I think, raise a lot of really powerful ways to help people, but also a lot of ethical concerns and a lot of thinking that needs to be done before we're trying these things out or implementing them en masse.
That's a problem, though. We tend to get ahead of ourselves, don't we, Samantha?
Well, I think, if you're the scientist who thinks you can revolutionize the world, like, that's really exciting. And if you're the company, the backer who thinks you can make a lot of money from revolutionizing the world, then let's press ahead. And no, there's not the kinds of people who are doing those things are not necessarily the same people who are saying, let's sit back and think about the implications of these things.
Samantha, given all this, I mean, it's just a little taste here. And I think most of us are completely kind of ignorant, and we're just trying to live our lives, right? We don't know all of these things that are going on, and it's kind of overwhelming to try to keep tabs on it. Yeah. So unfortunately, we are kind of going to be at the other end of it where it's going to seem almost like it's too late by the time we even find out about these things. Mm-hmm. But what do you feel like you can contribute through your writing, through your communicating? And then I guess I want to know too, where your hope lies in all of this. Are you, do you sleep at night kind of as you dive into these topics? How do you kind of bring yourself back into balance, and where do you find hope? So, yeah.
Well, I think hope is one of the things that I try to bring to all of these topics, because it can be overwhelming to even just the normal, regular things that we're already dealing with. We're kind of maxed out a little bit. So bringing clarity to these topics of, okay, well, if this technology is being offered to me by my doctor, what do I need to do about that? Can I think about using this kind of technology, helping people to get clarity on that, and to also empower them to give them frameworks to understand, to be able to look at a technology and be able to do that mental work themselves of, okay, here are the principles that make a life-giving, affirming technology. Here are some concerns. We have to vote on something. Like, one of the things people are voting on in different states right now is donor anonymity. So even if you personally are like, no, I'm against sperm donation or egg donation, or you're like, I'm very pro sperm donation or egg donation, regardless, or you're like, I don't care about that at all, regardless, you're going to be asked in these various states to vote whether you think donors should be able to maintain the anonymity that they had, or are we at the point where we're more concerned for the people who need to know their genetic origins? Can we give that to them? So how do we think about those things? And then just the hope and the clarity to understand that God has called us to this time. And so he's not calling us to something that we're supposed to do on our own, but he's not calling us to something that's so overwhelming that we can't do it. So he might be calling us to do something that is scary to do on our own, like walk on water, but he's not asking us to walk on water ourselves. He's calling us to keep our eyes fixed on him. So that's the kind of thing that I try to remind people, like, this is the ground on which our fiat takes form. God has chosen us for this time, for this day, for these problems. And it's our call and our responsibility to be the voice for the kingdom of God and human dignity in the world. But he also doesn't ask us to do that on our own.
I have a son who just graduated with a computer science degree, and we were talking, my husband and I, with him recently about AI and its implications, and and he sees the concerns, and at the same time he's more hopeful. I think he's just at being a younger person, and they're like still kind of experimenting and trying things out, and he's more hopeful. We're more the I say we're curmudgeons because we're we've lived a few things, and we look and say, oh, this looks like kind of like a train's going to crash here up ahead. But at the same time, where I kind of jumped in, I'm like, okay, that could happen. Like, we could implode ourselves here. It is going at a very fast rate, and I don't think we have a handle on things. But then it's like, but wait a minute, God, there's been many times in history that we've come to the cusp. We've almost been, jumping over the ledge as a society. And for whatever reason, God's grace, it seems to have, prevented us from demise. And ultimately, he's in charge of that. And there's just a relief in that, I think. Again, we can't just sit back and ignore everything, but we have to remember that he's got the whole world in his hands, as the old song When I Was a Little Girl went, and he really does. I don't know what you think about that as a sort of at least a perspective and mindset to have.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's both and. I think we have to have the hope for the future that your son has, and also the surrender to God's providence. And he does have the whole world in his hands, but we are part of that world, and so we don't want to just say, "Oh, it's up to God," because He is asking us to respond in various ways, and depending on who you are and your constellation of gifts and community and what you have influence over in your life, that response is going to be different. It's your own personal vocation. One of the mentors that I had in college liked to say that you are a word of God spoken only once. So what is that word that God wants to speak in the world through you?
What is your word? Do you know?
I don't know exactly, but I know that it has to do with my children, my husband, my family, my faith, and these intellectual curiosity that I have for understanding the implications of these technologies in the world, and somehow communicating hope and prayer and faith through writing. What about you?
Well, before I go, because I had another thought from that, and it is, how does family life, because that is really what grounds you. You have your hand in all these different things, and there's little things going out into the world here and there of yourself, but really your grounding force is in your family, and you've also really made that abundantly clear. So how does that work, which sometimes involves screaming kids and hearing a podcast? Like, how does that ground you, and how does that bring you hope and keep you focused?
Well, I think that, that's the entire point of life is love, and being able to be rooted in that and to be grounded in that. I think it can be tempting in the world we live in, or in when you work in intellectual spaces, it can be tempted to think you're just a mind and a body and to really ignore the body part. Having lots of little kids is very physically demanding. So that's kind of a gift because it keeps you rooted in reality. And I think interruptions are a gift we often ignore because it reminds us that we're not in control. Parenting just reminds you are not in control in so many different ways. My husband and my daughter right now are both dealing with some pretty serious health issues, and it just reminds you of who's in control, and that you have to get on your knees and ask for grace. Yeah.
What is, like, of your different projects? And I know I'm jumping all over the place. What is the one right now that holds your heart the most of all the things that you're doing? And maybe it is your family, or maybe apart from your family, what is the thing that just gets you going in the morning? Something that, I don't know, or just something that you want to share with us.
Well, I think within the family, definitely homeschooling the kids is my joy and passion. I just love that. And that's not to say that it doesn't have its serious challenges. And it was very trying on my patients most days, but it's also a great joy to be able to spend that time together as a family. Outside of that, writing is a true joy that fills me up and calms me down. And it's a nice release. Like my husband, for a while, he would say, "Why are you doing all these extra things?" I had to explain, no, this extra thing is a thing that's for me that feeds my soul. It's not crazy. Like I feel more myself when I do this. And then I really love doing the podcast, getting to talk to people who are experts in things like uterine transplants and infertility and eugenics, and getting to understand, the world that they live in intellectually and how we can integrate that and, be more united as a community when it comes to the issues that are coming, whether it's how do we vote or how do we personally integrate or not these technologies in our lives, and how do we stand together as Christians for human dignity, things like that.
And we'll definitely put your podcast in the show notes, so make sure to check that out. I'm glad you brought up the writing thing. That's obviously a passion of mine, but even more so, I wanted to ask you, and I reached out, I think, through Substack, because you wrote about all the book reading you did in this last year. And Samantha, I used to be a voracious reader. I know a lot of people my age and other ages struggle now with that because we have so many distractions. You get to the end of the day and you're tired and you just read the short article or whatever that How did you do that? I like personally, I need to know a little bit more how you did, because I know that's been a real, something that you've just dedicated yourself to. And I want to get back to it. So you kind of inspired me. But can you tell our listeners kind of what your pattern is for keeping to that commitment?
Yeah. Well, I realized that I wasn't doing as much reading of books as I wanted to. When I was a kid, my favorite thing in the world to do was read books. And I would be like reading them in the supermarket, following my mom around and at the beach and whatever in the car. And I wasn't doing that as much. And part of getting that time back for myself was saying like, I only have so much time. This is really important to me. Like, I feel like being a reader is part of my identity. How do I get that time back for myself? And, amongst other issues, the time thing was part of what my decision to just completely stop with social media. So I deleted a lot of my profiles in social media, which is a hard thing to break with as a writer because your ability to publish is tied to your quote unquote platform, and having numbers there is supposed to be important. But I realized like my output as a writer and as a person, but was really tied to what I was consuming and what I was taking in. So I started by deleting that social media. Did not miss that at all. And
what did you keep? I'm just curious because I'm kind of in that discernment process myself.
Well, I still have Substack, and that's kind of social media-y, although I don't have it on my phone. I don't have anything on my phone if it distracts me. So I don't have the internet. I have a password. My husband like screen time locked my phone, and I said, okay, I want like Walmart because I'm not really that distracted by our groceries. That's convenience. I want the bank. Like I don't need to look at that beyond transferring money. So that's a convenience I want on my phone. I kept my audiobooks, my calendar, but pretty much anything that was a time suck or a temptation, I just locked myself out of that. So my time is just, it's intentionally spent. And then there were a few places in my life, like my kids go to karate 2 nights a week, and there's an hour there where, so I guess that's 2 hours where I can say, this is sacred time that I had decided that reading is important to me. So you could fill in the blank with what's important to you, but this is important to my soul to be able to take this time to do this. So those are blocked out times that are a commitment.
Nice.
Yeah. So just carving out things that don't matter, so that I'm not, it's an opportunity cost to spend time on low value activities, so that I could make, but it was really hard to make the decision in the moment. So locking myself out of my phone meant, I could look at my phone, but it's not that interesting. Oh, that's a reminder that I actually have this high value activity that I want to be doing. Okay, I'll pick up the book.
Nice. Yeah. Oh, well, I do want to follow that, and I'm working on it. I'm working towards it. So, okay. Well, we want to circle back, and I know we just started getting into C.S. Lewis. What do you think he can teach us today? And what are some of the geniuses of him, would you say? Some of the things that drew you to him that caused you to like kind of want to mirror him in your work?
Well, I think one way we can see his genius is that his work stands the test of time, and the temptations he's writing about in the 40s, 50s, 60s, these concepts are not, even though the world has drastically changed, the human heart really is still, maybe in the exact specification, maybe there are little differences, but we're still wrestling with the same temptations. Evil, still evil. Good and beautiful, still good and beautiful. So he really gets to the heart of those things and the heart of the Christian message with such clarity. And one thing that I have done since writing is I tried to go back and read a lot more of C.S. Lewis. And that has been such a joy because he's got a bunch of nonfiction, but then he also has fiction. And when you read the nonfiction, I think you're just like, at least for me, cheering like, yes, that is so true. But then if you read the fiction in tandem with his nonfiction, it somehow makes, because of the power of story, it makes the nonfiction more real to you because you're reading it and it's just the concepts, and especially his talent for articulating the way that evil creeps up and tries to destroy good in the world. It just comes alive so much more. Like he has the Space trilogy for adults. That one is amazing. The third one, they can be read on their own. But the second one, the way that he personifies evil just makes everything he writes about it in his nonfiction just land home. And then his dystopian is the third one in that one. That Hideous Strength. It's just so powerful. So,
as you're describing that, it reminds me of how I came to understand and appreciate Flannery O'Connor, because I was one of those that didn't get her at first. And then I started reading her nonfiction. Then I went into her fiction. I'm like, okay, the two paired together, like brought her to life for me. And I think she does, as you're speaking of him, like personifying evil and some of the things that she exposed to, through fiction, also came back and fortified her nonfiction. So it's so interesting. I think that interplay between reality and, well, really fiction is about the truth, right? But you're just telling a story, and some people are genius at that. So I'm so excited to read both of your books. They both are so different and so interesting, Samantha. I just am so proud of you as a young mom. I was, doing some things back in the days where my kids were your kids' age, but I feel like you're a little bit ahead of me in that. And it's just really interesting to watch and see. And I wanted to kind of raise you up and let more people know about you. So despite the fact that you're not on much social media, you can find Samantha at Substack. That's where she and I converge sometime. Is there anything else you want to leave with us today before we say goodbye?
Well, just on Flannery O'Connor, have you seen the movie?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
So that scene where she talks to Liam Neeson, I think plays the priest, the scene where they talk about grace.
Yeah.
I mean, it was so powerful. So just if people want to do more on Flannery O'Connor, and you just want a snippet,
yes,
it would be a really great snippet.
It's a good introduction. Yeah.
Not really about my books, but
yeah. Well, thank you. I mean,
grace is more important.
Yeah. Absolutely. And Flannery is my girl. So anyway, well, Samantha, thank you so much. I want to let you get back to your kids today, but thank you for taking some time for us and with us today. I really appreciate it. Unlike earlier episodes of Matters of Soul Importance, this one really diverged into a lot of different topics. As we were preparing for the recording, Samantha offered many of her projects as possible discussion points. And since I found all of them interesting, I decided to do less of a deep dive into the main topic and dip into the many areas in which God has called this young mother. I find it interesting that healthy foods was one of those areas, since the retreat house at which I met Samantha focused on serving fresh, healthy, homemade foods. It's one of the memorable aspects of that retreat in Easton, Massachusetts, not just because of the delicious food itself, but the hospitality offered us. It almost seemed too good to be true, to be treated so kindly and to be nourished so well, both in body and spirit. Sometimes busy mothers are so busy giving that we forget what it's like to be served, and not only given a plate of warm food, but food prepared with hearts and hands of love. Why bring up this in relation to an episode focusing on C.S. Lewis, who, from my knowledge, cared more about words than anything else? I think because if I could pull all of the tangents of Samantha's life into one theme, it would be that: service in charity. Whether bending low to tend to a sick child or investigating the most recent bioethics issues of our day, her aim seems clear: love and service. And yes, words can be a way that we serve others too. Through Samantha's commitment to reading and then trying to articulate her thoughts to a wounded world, she is serving with love and following the path God has set out for her, just as much as when she is preparing a healthy meal for her family. It is here we find the crossover with C.S. Lewis, who, formerly a non-believer, found Christ, and once that love story took hold, made it his life's mission, whether through fiction, nonfiction, stories for children or adults, to bring the truth, Christ himself, into the light. I realized in hindsight I never did circle back to the question I posed to Samantha, and she turned back on me. What is your word? What is the gift of yourself that you give back to God most of all? I've thought about it a little, and I think it's contained in my tagline, "Don't lose sight of the light." Like C.S. Lewis and Samantha, I've been gifted with the light of Christ, and having been changed and transformed through that, feel compelled to offer the same back to others and to reflect that source the best I possibly can within my confines and own brokenness as a human being. For that reason, and even though it's an impossible standard to live out perfectly, I think I choose as the one word, light bearer. At my life's end, we'll see if the majority of those with whom I've crossed paths agree. Until then, I'll continue to try to live that out and hopefully catch a few souls for Christ along the way. One final thought from this interview. As Lent approaches, I find Samantha's reflection on low versus high value activities a valuable thing for reflection. I'll be pondering that in the days ahead in the hopes of spending more energy on the activities that lead me closer to heaven and ditching those that don't. A good challenge for us all, I think. Well, in a couple of weeks, we'll ask the question, how do our earthly fathers shape our views of our heavenly Father? We all have fathers, so everyone should be able to find something to relate to in this conversation. Until then, don't lose sight of the light.